Now we are actually live, and so I want to welcome anyone who's joining us and give people a little bit of time to join. But I wanted to start with the goal of today's session, which is to help parents make informed decisions about their children and returning to school or not returning during a pandemic. And so I thought the best people I knew to help people think about this were the homeschooling experts who have helped me become smarter than anything else has, I think, in my entire life. You all have helped me become smarter than elementary school, middle school, high school, college, or graduate school. And I started kind of on this journey, I think about 10 years ago, knowing pretty much nothing. And anyone who was there with me then knew that. And some were forgiving. I think all of you were forgiving. And some people were very mean about my ignorance. But I've come a long way in understanding this mind-blowing concept that you could be amazingly brilliant, successful, and balanced without actually even ever going to school. Yeah. And I will say there's like a spectrum with homeschooling, and the people I ended up gravitating toward were people who did something called unschooling, which is, and y'all can correct me, but it's more like just living naturally, not with a curriculum. And I was just blown away by how amazing all of your children were, how amazing all of you were. And I will say one thing before we start getting into it is, yes, you do need to have a loving parent who cares about you and is not abusive for this to work. So that's for parents who fall into that category. And I know not all of our children in the world have those parents. But if you are a loving parent who cares about your children, then these amazing, incredibly intelligent women will have a lot of advice for you. So I started a little post on Facebook where I said, you know, for parents who are super scared about not sending their kids back because of socialization, can some of my homeschooling expert friends chime in? And we had over 100 comments with just amazing advice on that. So I thought we'd just start talking about the idea that socialization can happen even during a pandemic, totally different, I understand. But socialization can happen without school, and also perhaps maybe some ways better even during a pandemic when you consider going to school requires wearing masks, usually being indoors, and being 6 feet apart from each other. So why don't we start with that, and anyone who has some stuff to share about that. And I know it's going to be hard because you all have such great ideas. So I don't even know who goes first. Maybe alphabetical order by first name. So that would be Kathy first, if that works for you.
Well, I'm a mom and a grandma, and I homeschooled all my kids. None of them went to nursery school, preschool. None of them went to regular public school up until they all ended up choosing to go to college, at least some. Two of them got college degrees, and one of them only went to college for part time. And my kids did not homeschool during a pandemic, so it is different, as Lisa said so brilliantly. However, a lot of the ways that people do socialize now, including, chatting on social media or while playing games together virtually, a lot of people do a certain amount of socialization, or socializing rather, with each other virtually anyway. So we are very lucky that is something that we have to deal with this pandemic. It's a lot harder, I'm sure, for young kids. They're much more in the physical world.
But so, I'm also thinking, like, they have these pandemic pods now, and yes, this is something that homeschoolers have been doing for a long time, not calling them pods, but more like co-ops. And in the pandemic pod world, they're finding other families that have socially distanced that they can connect with outdoors. And this was just I mean, not that you had to be outdoors in the co-op idea, but this was just a part of homeschooling life previously.
We almost always met outdoors. We were too big of a group for most indoor get-togethers. So it's park days, and that's very typical of homeschool groups to have park days, and that's where they get together. It was probably too much physical contact and too many hours spent together to be safe in a pandemic. But like I said, we weren't in a pandemic. But I think that families probably can do real, actual physical contact type get-togethers with the people in their pod. But I don't know how many people are finding it easy to find a group that's small enough, you know, like 3 families maybe, depends on the size of the families.
Yeah.
It's risky.
So
And then there's also,
people? Yeah,
I have some thoughts. So there's also the challenges of forming the pod are not only finding the few families that you're comfortable with their level of exposure in the world, but also on other levels where you agree educationally and philosophically, and your needs also need to meet, because sometimes the pods are only wanting just some daycare or some socialization, and some pods want full on like a replication of school. So to try and meet all the variables to create these very, very small pods, it is proving to be somewhat difficult. I think I'm watching some of the discussions in the groups, and it'll be interesting to see how it moves forward, you know, hopefully. The thing is though, I mean, we all know that often when we start homeschooling, it doesn't look the same as it did in the first month, right? It doesn't look like that. It does, you know, so when we're homeschooling, when we're starting out homeschooling, we have all these ideas and these plans and these, you know, we got to get our ducks in a row and make sure we know what we're going to be doing. And then 1 month in, 2 months in, everything shifts. This wasn't working. We're going to backtrack. We're going to try something different. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out through the school year.
Yeah.
Flexibility is key.
Yeah. Oh, go
So
ahead.
Lori, or I don't know, Lori or Cindy. I should have come up with a good protocol, like put your hand up and then you'll be the one who we have speak. Cindy, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I'll add a little something there. For those that don't know me out there, my name's Cindy, and I have homeschooled my 7 children from the beginning. They're all grown now, and it was a wonderful experience. Therefore, that means, being my oldest is 33, I started when there was no internet, and there were not a lot of homeschoolers, and I think a lot of you are in that category. So I remember also remembering that socialization versus socializing is very different, right? Socialization means how do we culturally adapt to other human beings, right? And then socializing means I want to be with my friends. I think a lot of times when people talk about socialization, they're actually talking about socializing. Yeah. But starting in the beginning when there were not a lot of homeschoolers, now I had my own pod, right, with 7 children. Of course, it didn't start that way, right? I started one at a time.
Or you had a volleyball team as a volleyball player.
That's right. So, but you know, the opportunity the pandemic is giving people, I think, is an opportunity to come together as a family and really cement that family unit as well. You know, we were corporate gypsies for many years, moved around a lot. And, you know, that family unit will stay with you, and friends will come and go. And to take the opportunity when school often doesn't require you to go as deep if you don't want to, you know, because they're gone a lot and you're gone a lot working. You can take those opportunities to cement that family unit, and that brings those stress levels down, and the mental health that we're talking about going through a pandemic, I think is really important to maybe come up with some new traditions as a family and to unite yourselves better that way. And then when it comes to the pods, 3 years ago, I decided to extend my homeschooling time by opening a learning center. And I have 8 to 10 kids that come every day, Monday through Friday, for 4 hours.
Wow.
Yeah, they can choose 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, or 5 days. So I've been doing it for 3 years.
Wow, you're ahead of everything.
Yeah, it's very unschooly. So I thought, well, I really enjoy it. So, excuse my dog. I had half of them are kids coming out of school. Maybe a bullying situation happened. Maybe things are just, a lot of it was either bullying or they got with the wrong crowd. A lot of middle schoolers. We got a lot of middle schoolers coming in. And then some of them were homeschoolers looking for some socializing. But what I found is they really enjoyed those coming out of school. So those of you obviously thinking about, removing yourself from the school potentially, there are a lot of social kids coming out of school into my pod and ending up loving it, ending up saying, wow. I had a girl that was removed for a year. She wanted to go back to high school, so she's going back. I don't think this is what she wanted it to be, which was the socializing. But she said to me, one of the questions we asked in our discussion, what's one of the best things you've done in your life? And she said, coming here. And I thought, wow, okay. She didn't have to say that. A lot of them have said that. So there are benefits to small groups instead of the large groups because they got that individual attention. They got to make friends that were maybe less shallow and more depth. They got to experiment in their creativity again, because I'm all about creativity and innovation and making mistakes, and then meeting them where they are with their academics instead of being in one big, same as everybody, because a lot of them, as we all are, we're all at different levels of our education, and they got to be met right where they are instead of feeling either behind or struggling or whatever it may be. So
I think it's so cool that you did that. And I had a conversation totally unrelated with a friend who is an entrepreneur and helps people with businesses. And I think that what you're doing could be a business for so many people who just know how to do. I mean, actually, so many homeschooling experts could, if they want, start these pods or what we call co-ops with kids in their community, because you know how to do it. And I do know some of the people in this group and in our larger group also do consulting and are available to help families either, directly because the kids go there, or just by video consultations. So that's so cool that you've been doing it for 2 years, and oh my God, you must be a godsend. And hopefully maybe you could teach other people to do what you're doing, because it's needed.
And that's why I went into it, because I thought I wanted to try to create something that could be replicated. And then this pandemic happened. I went, I'm not ready yet. I've done it 3 years, but this was the year I was going to maybe start writing a book about it or something.
Oh yeah, do that.
Consultations or something about what my experience has been and what I learned through the 3 years. I feel like I'm in a really good spot in what, my learning curve. But yeah, that's exactly why I did it, actually, was to create another alternative. And then boom, when this pandemic hit, then these pods got started talking about, and I thought, isn't that funny? You think you're being so creative.
I'm gonna share a link in the Facebook Live with this huge booming Facebook group for pandemic pods. So I'll share a link to that if people aren't in it. Lori hasn't had a chance to say anything, and I know she has a million things on her mind now and always. And then I think Julie wants to say something. So Lori, jump in. I know there's probably like a page of thoughts in your mind right now.
For those who don't know me, I'm Laurie A. Couture, author of Instead of Medicating and Punishing. I'm an expert in children's behavioral learning and attachment, mental health professional. I unschooled my special needs son, Bryson, who I think a lot of people are aware tragically passed away in 2017. And so for me, unschooling, homeschooling is crucial, because parents often believe that there's this hypothetical future that's guaranteed to their children. It's not. So to be able to have those years with my son, that's what will fuel the rest of my life, is those memories. So I think it's even more crucial now than ever after having an experience like that to see that it's not worth that our children losing that time when they could be engaged in their passions today rather than 10, 15 years from now in a hypothetical future that may not exist for them. And, you know, that's not something a lot of parents want to think about, but there are thousands of children that pass away every year. And for those parents, a lot of them, that's one of the things they said is how many years of my child's life were spent in school. I want to talk a little bit about that social piece that we were talking about. The most important part of a child's social life is the parent-child attachment. So that needs to always come first. And I think that sharing the outdoors with other families is crucial, whether we're in a pandemic or not. I mean, we always would join homeschool groups and unschool groups that were nature-based, but today that's especially important because then you're able to be together outdoors and there's less of that pressure to, because everybody has different beliefs about how they want to integrate this information about COVID-19, and the outdoors is sort of a neutralizing factor to that. Also, forming groups and pods based on mutual interest is really important. You know, getting together based on, you know, are your kids into Dungeons and Dragons? Are they into cooking? Are they into, you know, are they into nature? So forming around those interests is so important. I can't tell you how important it is to not just stick with one group, but explore other groups, because there could be a dynamic that maybe gets kind of tired and old, but then you join another group. And my son was actually part of about 3 and at one point up to 5 different groups, but 2 or 3 regularly. And it was great because he had different peer groups for different activities. So that's, I see the pods being a positive for that. And yes, I think co-ops are important because it gives parents more options. So many parents, I hear this, the number one reason why parents often say they can't homeschool is they say, I work, or my husband and I both work, or my partner and I, you know, we both work full time, or I'm a single parent. Well, I was a single working parent who also ran a business and took clients, you know, in a clinic, and I made it work because in my eyes, how I looked at it is I didn't see public school as an option. And when you don't see it as an option to fall back on, it's amazing the ideas that can pop up. I just actually recently did a video on my YouTube channel, 9 different strategies for parents who are looking for childcare options. Cindy, programs like Cindy's could be really crucial for families who may not be able to solve the childcare dilemma, but yet at the same time, they want that nurturing environment that they can be a part of. So I see that now that this has happened, more parents will, the mainstream is now being introduced to homeschooling and unschooling and alternative education like co-ops, pods, and et cetera. And we're seeing that, yes, parents, you can do this. In fact, you were meant by nature to do this. You know, public schooling is very new on the scene, 1850s.
I know, people don't, we have short memories. Yeah. I mean, I was talking to a friend who just thought there were always schools since the time humans came into existence. And, yeah. And people don't realize there was life before it. And also, I think that a lot of people are so used to saying, I want things to go back to normal and I miss the old way, but then they like kind of catch themselves. Especially, I have a lot of colleagues with young children, and they're realizing how amazing it is to be able to spend this time with their kids. And one of the things I had talked about in the initial conversation was the structure of school that we think that we have to have, and that if we don't have that, kids will suffer. And I love this, some of my friends, colleagues with young children realize, wait, I can let my children stay up later, wake up later, I can work, then once my kids get up, I'm with my kids, then my kids go play, then I go back to work. But like the schedule doesn't have to be the 9 to 5 thing
Rigid.
that we always think of as a schedule. And like kids will live if they stay up late and get up later. And like, that's fine. That could totally work. And so the families are like, this is really good. I'm connecting with my kids more than ever before. Also, even some of the elected officials, I was listening to a podcast, and they're like, yeah, I've never spent so much time with my kids, and I've really gotten to know my kids. This is a whole thing that's happening that they're realizing it's a benefit, but they're like, but they have to go to school. And many kids are saying, I like it this way better, especially, I'm sure kids of all age, but I really see it with the young kids. They want to be, well, it's what you talked about, Lori. They want to be attached with their parents. They love to be with their parents. Those are the people, their parents and their family. These are the people they want to be with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a fallacy that teenagers don't.
Oh,
Yeah.
completely. Teenagers love to be with their parents.
Yeah, and I didn't ever have troubles with my teenagers. I mean, I really enjoyed them. So there's a way to be
You're
teenagers.
7 teenagers.
That's right.
My son wanted to homeschool an extra year just so he could hang out with me, you know, and his friends. I mean, you know, the teenage angst and that idea of individuating from parents is not sustainable, and from nature's point of view. That is not a sustainable goal that you would see in any hunter-gatherer culture. That is a Western phenomenon. Teenagers crave that. My 15-year-old nephew is always calling me up, Auntie, want to hang out. My oldest nephew used to be that way too. Right now he's working all the time. My little niece who's 10, you know, they always want to hang out, and it's a fallacy. It's when the parent-child attachment relationship has been injured that teens are pulling away, and when they're stuck in that pop culture world of their peers and the media, you know, that's what harms that attachment relationship.
And
I think it's also a habit of speech, though, too. You know, people get in the habit of saying, I live for coffee, or I live for wine, and I want my kids out of my hair. I mean, those are the three things that parents are always saying, or it doesn't have to be wine, it can be beer. But I don't actually personally drink coffee or wine, but I also didn't want my kids out of my hair. But it's just, you hear it so often, it's a popular trope, I think. And I think to some extent, even parents don't feel it when they're saying it, to some extent. They're joking, kind of, sort of.
On the flip side of that, when you reach middle school, there is a brain shift that happens going from me-centered to little fish in a big pond, that they're aware now. Their awareness comes in, and they aren't seeking what I call safe risks. So it's not that that desire to get out in the world isn't there. It is, but you can do that as a family as well. But they can volunteer. There's ways to volunteer during a pandemic that's safe. You know, that you just have to alter what you're doing. And it may not be in person. You may have to be making things and sending it off, or things like that. But they are seeking out exterior experiences. It is true. And so, you know, middle school, high school do need those kind of experiences, but it doesn't have to be that. They have to attach only to peers and not to family. Because
that's not really attachment. Attachment really is between the family and the, you know, exactly. That their children's brain development at various stages is always within that attachment relationship, you know, whether that's an outward community focus or not.
Julie?
Yeah.
You've been waiting.
Thanks. I wanted to briefly say hi because I forgot to when we first said hello, everybody. My name's Julie, and I'm a former school teacher, now homeschool mom, unschool mom of teen and tween boys. And I have a master's in special education, and I help families transition to homeschooling. So Lori, when you were talking about the attachment between the parent and the child being so important, I wanted to point out that oftentimes it's school that comes in between that attachment. It's the construct of school, it's the pressures of school, it's the stress of school, it's somebody telling you that your child's doing school wrong that creates an sometimes irreparable disattachment from your parent. And that's tragic when that happens.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
almost, you know, that's actually one of the biggest reasons I talk about in my book is that when children are sent to daycare and school, that actually causes you know, a real serious attachment wound that can have devastating effects for the rest of the child's life, because you are actually separating the child. I mean, what builds attachment is the child has a need and the parent responds to that need and meets the need. And that can't happen when a child is separated for 6 hours a day, day in and day out for 13 years from their parent. And then all the stress and the abuse and the trauma of school itself. So yes, Julie, that can't be overstated enough. School really is harmful to the parent-child attachment relationship. So we have an
For sure.
opportunity to fix that now, which is great, you know?
Yeah. I also wanted to go back to when we were talking about pods and co-ops. I just want to, you know, make clear what we're talking about here, because there is a difference, and I know Cindy's going to have some information about this. There is a difference between a true co-op and running a business like a learning center. So, you know, a true co-op, people are sharing the load. No money is exchanging hands. You're not renting out a place necessarily. There are legal considerations regarding real legal considerations for what a co-op could be in your area, and so we're talking to people from all over right now, so you really have to check it out what the legal ramifications are in your area. And in some states, in some countries, it's okay to just get together and exchange money and exchange childcare, and not have any licenses or not have any taxes to worry about or something. But in other states, it might be some very strict rules around the exchange of money and the exchange of childcare. So I just caution parents to make sure that they're taking the bigger picture here, even things like homeowners insurance and zoning laws and things like that, that you may not really consider at first when you're hosting other families in your home for educational and childcare purposes. So I encourage families to be creative and make this work for them, because this is really a tragic time in history that is a traumatic time for families that really needs to be addressed as well. I like to talk about that, this collective unintentional homeschooling situation that everyone finds themselves in, where they're suddenly losing their school communities. It's quite a shift, and I think recognizing the mental health and the emotional health aspects there is really important too. So thanks.
One of the things that I'm loving about what could potentially happen is, and it's what homeschooling families have said that they've wanted, is they want certain parts of school, like to join a sports team perhaps, or to join a band. But in some states, like the state I live in, you can't do partial parts of school. Like you're either all in or all out. And that, you know, the homeschooling families figured out alternatives as they needed to. But now they're talking about, even in my state, like, okay, maybe we can have parents opt into certain parts of school. And so this is something I'm really loving that people are opening their mind to. And the other thing that was very frustrating for me in the state I lived in is like in places like Florida or Nevada, they had a virtual schooling option for 20 years in Florida, 15 years in Nevada, and families in New York never had the option for virtual schooling. And I have seen with homeschooling families sometimes like it's easier if there's a reason that they need to or want to have their kids leave school, the transition with a virtual school before they do something different is helpful. And so it was frustrating for me that New York families would have to pay for that option. And now for the first time, they get that option. So we're getting so many more options for our families at this time, which is very exciting for me. And I hope lasts after the pandemic is a bit resolved.
I think it will.
I just want to kind of play devil's advocate with that for a minute, Lisa. Just basically, I used to read a lot of the Caseman's columns in Home Education magazine, I can't remember their first names, but they used to do a legal column, the Caseman family, and they talked a lot about how we do need to caution families that the more you ask of the school system, the more the school system is going to believe that parents need them in order to homeschool. We have to remember homeschooling is a right that is a birthright. It is not given to us by the state. But if we start to hand over too many rights or ask for too many perks from the school, then they will start stepping into our homes. And there are many families that don't want that. So we have to be careful that if you are asking for sports or a class at this school, ask yourself how that might affect the family that really doesn't want the school involved at all. So we have to also balance that so that schools don't think that we need them in order to educate our own children.
Yeah.
That's an important
That's a
part.
great point. I mean, I think
Good balance.
in the time of the pandemic, things are a little more relaxed. But yes, absolutely. But I
think, and it's a parent who knows that, Lori. The problem is the parents don't know that they don't need the schools. But the parents who do know that will always be able to advocate for their kids in an effective way. My kids were unschooled, but they all chose to leave unschooling. They didn't leave homeschooling. They left unschooling at age 13 to 15. Well, not really 13, 14 to 15, depending on the kid. I had 3 daughters. And I have 3 daughters. They're still all with me. I'm so lucky. But anyways, but what I was going to say is one of them, she really wanted to join the high school dance team. So she tried out. There was a homeschool program through the district. She tried out, she got in. The homeschool teacher person was lovely. She didn't make her do a particular, she asked her what she was interested in. She kind of widgeted the curriculum for my daughter. It was really great. But then they changed the homeschool program and they fired this teacher. She had to go back to teaching chemistry in a high school, normal stuff. They changed the whole program. And it was so outrageous. But my daughter was now head captain of the team. She was a senior in her high school team. She was the head captain. She didn't want to leave that cushy berth. It was wonderful. She was literally there for 4 hours a day where she was teaching. The dance teacher loved her, adored her. So she was teaching all these classes. She was doing choreography. And then after 4 hours, she'd go to the junior college and she'd dance there. It was fantastic. She was becoming a leader. It was really great. So we didn't want to leave it, but the homeschool thing had gotten terrible. So I tried to meet with the person of the new homeschooling thing. No dice. This person was not to be reasoned with. So I went to the head honcho of alternative programs or something like that at my district. And I just said, look, my daughter could dance anywhere. She's already kind of a star at the junior college. We will leave everyone flat if you guys can't widget this somehow. We signed up under this program that was wonderful. You've completely changed the program. We need to do something different. So he literally called the homeschool person and said, whatever Whitney, blah, blah, whatever she wants to do, let her. Whatever she doesn't want to do, don't make her. And we literally, that was what happened. But it's because I was absolutely sure of myself. And I think if you give parents that assurance and that empowerment, then they will be able to work it out. I do think, I don't know how to give parents that feeling, but it's the key, I think.
The ironic thing about it is the public school has taken that feeling, that empowerment out of parents. And the irony is that the school has convinced us that we can't educate our kids, but yet we have to send our kids to the same institution that didn't provide us with the competence to do it. And so, Kathy, some of us parents that have to be the rebels, we have to stand up for those parents who may not feel empowered to say, this is what we need. And we only want this, we don't want that. So that's a great
when
story.
the people at the dance studio would send everyone said, every single family sent their kids to me for homework help. And then when they heard my kids didn't have lessons, grades, tests, assignments, textbooks, they said, well, wait, how are they going to learn this stuff? I said, well, how did you learn it? And they said, well, I had all that stuff. I said, yeah, but you don't know it now, do you? You're sending your kids to me. And they went, oh my God, she's totally right. I don't freaking know it.
Yeah.
I can't help my kid.
Yeah.
So it was a learning moment that happened a bazillion times.
Well, I just listened to the comptroller of New York City say he didn't feel comfortable helping his kids with math homework because he's not a teacher. And his kids were like, but you're the comptroller of New York City. Like, you can help us with math. And he's like, oh no, I'm not a teacher. I can't do that. You need, like, you're right, Lori and Kathy and everyone who said that. Like, the schools have programmed even the comptroller of New York City to think he can't help his kids with math. What? I was like, wow, what did I just hear? So strange. I want to go back to something y'all said earlier, because I just thought, you know, as a person who worked in public schools for more than 20 years, I could be wrong and I could maybe be missing something, but in general, the families I know who homeschool, they don't have the teenage angst that I often hear of. And it's not a small group that I've heard from, because the homeschooling community that I have has about 10,000 parents in it. And they don't have that angst and that, I don't know, just that distance that often you see with school families. And I think that's, well, you all can explain this more than I can, but I think it's because there's not that tension and struggle between choosing your friends versus your parents, and parents are not cool, and all of, you know, you're supposed to be distanced from your parents and all of that stuff. Like, you all, and I know this is painting a broad stroke, but more than what I've experienced in regular schooling, have had very good relationships with teenage children. I'm sure there's exceptions.
I was in an inclusive group, which means that we had all sorts of people. The reason why the need for inclusive is because some homeschool groups have you sign a religious thing that you abide by these, you know, you have these beliefs, because they want a shared community of everyone's the same, religious wise. They probably have other diversities, but our group was called inclusive because we had all kinds of people with all kinds of religious beliefs. But basically what we ended up with was all the misfits. So we didn't have we had a few evangelical Christians, but not very many, but we had Catholics and Jews and Muslims and a lot of atheists. And we had, you know, Buddhists and pagans and, you know, misfits. Basically. But anyways, what I was going to say is there was in the group some people that were extremely authoritarian, and they ended up with a lot of rebellion and a lot of angst. Yeah. I think it's more the authoritarianism.
You're right.
It's the.
Yeah, I also want to add that even in unschooling families, there's teenage angst. It's there, you know, the angst isn't directed towards the parent in my case, or in most cases. I don't think the angst is directed toward the parent, but I don't think that unschooling or homeschooling can protect a child from, say, mental health or those kinds of challenges. But what it does allow is for the parent-child attachment, again, to be at the forefront of that. And the parent is very tuned into what's going on, and the child's very comfortable coming to the parent saying, these are the things that I'm struggling with. And so together they can move through whatever angst that's happening. Because I know that my kids are struggling with typical teenage angsty type problems, but we're doing it together, as opposed to that distance that it sometimes creates it even more distance, where parents are like, I don't understand my kid. I don't know what's going, you know, and because they're not spending time with them.
Yeah, so I think I totally said that wrong. And so thank you for saying it better. And Lori, yeah, make it even better.
Sure. I was just going to say that I think that a lot of when you have kids in the homeschooling and unschooling, and I know this is not a popular view, So I'm going out on a limb here, but I have to speak, I have to speak the truth based on the research on tribal societies that there's, you know, hundreds of years of research. They didn't have teenage angst, and children in those cultures did not have mental health issues. And I'm seeing that when I do see, and I have worked with thousands of children over the years in many different capacities, hundreds in the mental health field, and seeing unschooled kids and homeschooled kids was like night and day. It was like meeting, you know, going into another world. And I do believe that if you have a stable family unit that does practice attachment parenting, it does prevent a lot of those mental health issues. I think that one of the biggest problems we're seeing now is when homeschoolers and unschoolers are using the media. They are exposing their kids to the same things that they say they don't want their kids exposed to in school. And so if kids are staring at screens and they're getting that same toxicity that they're getting if they were in school with the peer group, then that is going to affect their mental health. And so we have to realize that if we want to take our children out of that environment in the school system, we have to ask ourselves, why are we willing to expose them to it, you know, from another area, you know, through the media. I mean, the media is outrightly traumatizing to even adults, let alone to children. And actually a lot of the research now, I'm putting it in my second book, the research is showing that it's the screen medium itself, not even necessarily what you're using it for, the screen medium itself that creates the opioid releases and the addictions. So if you add, you know, elements of today's video gaming, which is extremely different than the video games we grew up with. If you add today's MMOG video games and the sandbox games that are just eternal and they go on forever and ever, and then you add social media, these things are engineered. They are engineered to keep consumers consuming. It is not the Atari and the Nintendo that we went through. So if kids are homeschooling, but they're also being exposed to these other neurochemical hijacking systems, then yes, that is another source. Just like if you were exposing children to somebody abusive, that's, you know, that's going to negate the effects of homeschooling.
Well, I'd like, because I follow all of you all, even if I'm just lurking, to learn from you. But I like what Lori has written about over the years, where the and also just watching some interviews with you and your son, Lori, just the importance of conversations about what they're doing is doing to them and making smart choices. So like for parents to just say like, no screen time, no video games, that's not helpful in helping your children understand making a wise choice. And I do recall a video I saw with Lori and Bryson just talking, I think this was a while ago, so I'm using my memory, but Bryson was talking about like, yeah, I was reflecting on what I was doing after talking to my mom, and I needed to make different choices. And I think those conversations are so incredibly powerful. Don't ban it. Don't say you can't do it. Have meaningful conversations with your children about what is healthy and good for them. I do want to tell everyone a time check. We're going to wrap up at 9 o'clock and it's 8:55. And I've loved this conversation, and it's actually so good to see all of your faces. But maybe we can get some final thoughts from everyone, and then
let's start with Cindy, because she's gotten short shrift this talk about angst.
Yeah.
All right, a couple things from what y'all are saying to piggyback off of. To me, I think it's about, when it comes to teenagers or any children, it's about releasing our need to control and giving them a voice. I'm all about giving children voices. And in my learning center, it's mostly middle school and high school. One particular girl said, I can come to you about anything and you won't freak out. And that, I think that's what parents have been conditioned to do, that to control the trajectory of where their child is going is to control it and not to, and are afraid of hearing their dissenting voices. And young people need to have dissenting voices that they can say safely. It doesn't mean they're going to stay in that space if it's all against what your belief is. They need to feel their voices and to hear it and to experiment with it. And if you give them a safe spot to say whatever they want, that's going to be beneficial. And the other thing I really wanted to say, it'll probably have to be a whole nother thing. I'd love to do it for the next one, which is the idea that I know we'll probably hit it, probably the next one. Put it in your ear, Lisa, that we should have a conversation about the fears of not keeping up. And, you know, that I know that's a big fear of everyone. How am I going to keep up? If I pull them out for a year, how am I going to keep up? And my basic thing here is there are no educational emergencies. People have, I have done this learning center for 3 years. I've had kids pulled out for 1 and 2 years from middle school and high school and have gone back. We have done 45 minutes of academics, 45 minutes at middle school and high school. Everything else is very innovative, very creative, helping them have voices again, all that. They've gone back into school and went right back to their A's and B's if that's what they were. It did not harm them to take a step back and what I call giving them a soft reset. You can give a soft reset and it's going to be okay because they're still growing because they're human beings. Their intelligence is going to grow from 13 to 14 because they're 1 year older. And so that's something I think would be really great to explore because I know people are afraid of not keeping up and stepping back and thinking that will be detrimental. And I can assure you, because I see it in my learning center, they go back and they're fine. So that was before pandemic. And I think for the pandemic time, it's needed to have a soft reset, sit back, reconnect with your creativity and your innovation and who you are, get voices, have discussions. All those things are going to be, I think, are more important than keeping up academically or what you think skills that have to be inputted when you don't have to input specific skills to grow. That's all.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any, we are going to have these conversations. I don't know if I said it, but Cindy said it a few times. But for today, does anyone else have any other thoughts they want to share before we end this wonderful conversation?
I'm going to put some links when we get this posted, put some links to some things that I want to expand on. So
awesome.
Below.
And then I will say I looked a little bit at some of the comments and some of them are bizarre. So so I'll be looking at and responding to and whatnot with those as well as the rest of you. But thank you so much as always for helping me get smarter. And I think all of us helping each other get smarter and have new perspectives on life and learning and raising amazing citizens in our world. So thank you. Mwah. I appreciate you all. And we will be back at some point. So have a great night and thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
See everyone.
Bye. Good to see you all.
Take care.